I never thought my own sister would destroy our family for money. But when our father died and left behind a multi-million-dollar estate, Diana showed me just how far greed can push someone you've loved your entire life. It started 3 years ago when Dad's health began declining. He was 78, a successful real estate developer who'd built our family's wealth from nothing. Diana and I had always been close, or so I thought. She was 2 years older, married to a lawyer named Brandon, and they lived in the same city as Dad while I worked in Chicago. When Dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Diana immediately moved into his house to take care of him. At the time, I thought it was sweet and thoughtful. I visited every weekend, but Diana was there every single day, handling his medications, his appointments, his business affairs. "Kevin, you don't need to worry about anything," she'd tell me. "I've got Dad covered. Just focus on your job." I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my sister. Dad passed away on a Tuesday morning in October. Diana called me at work, sobbing. I drove straight down for the funeral, heartbroken but grateful that Dad hadn't suffered long. The service was beautiful. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. Dad had touched so many lives through his business and charity work. But the real shock came 3 days later. Diana asked me to meet her at Dad's lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I expected we'd split everything equally. That's what Dad had always told us. His real estate portfolio was worth about $4 million, plus his savings, investments, and the family house. I sat in that mahogany-paneled office, expecting to hear our names called together. Instead, the lawyer, Mr. Peterson, cleared his throat and began reading. "I, Theodore Mitchell, being of sound mind and body." The words that followed changed everything. According to the will, Diana inherited the entire estate. Everything. The house, the rental properties, the investment accounts, the business, all of it. I got nothing except Dad's watch and a few personal items. I sat there stunned, unable to process what I was hearing. Diana was crying, saying things like, "Kevin, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Dad never told me, but something felt wrong." Dad had always been fair with us. He'd paid for both our colleges equally, helped us both with down payments on our first homes. The idea that he'd leave Diana everything and me nothing, it didn't make sense. "When was this will written?" I asked Mr. Peterson. He checked the document. 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Right after Dad's diagnosis. Right after Diana had moved in. Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Kevin, but as far as I know, this is the only will Mr. Mitchell ever had prepared." That was a lie. Dad had mentioned updating his will multiple times over the years. He'd talked about wanting to make sure Diana and I were both taken care of. There had to be an earlier version. Diana kept apologizing, saying she'd share the inheritance with me anyway, that we'd figure something out. But her words felt hollow, and when I tried to discuss specifics over the following weeks, she became evasive. "Then we'll talk about everything." But we never did talk about everything. Instead, Diana started making excuses. The estate was more complicated than expected. There were debts to pay off. The real estate market was soft. Maybe in a few months. Meanwhile, she moved into Dad's house permanently and started renovating it. She bought a new BMW. She and Brandon took a 3-week vacation to Europe. It became clear that Diana had no intention of sharing anything with me. That's when I decided to investigate. I spent my own money hiring a private investigator named Tom Walsh. I also retained my own attorney, Lisa Chen, who specialized in estate litigation. What we uncovered over the next 6 months made my stomach turn. The private investigator discovered that Diana had been systematically isolating Dad from his friends and other family members during his final months. She'd told people that Dad was too sick for visitors, that he needed quiet and rest. She'd screened his phone calls and mail. More disturbing, we found evidence that Diana had been researching Dad's financial accounts, getting herself added as a joint owner on several bank accounts, and had even obtained power of attorney over his affairs. But the smoking gun came from Dad's housekeeper, Carmen, who'd worked for our family for 15 years. Carmen was uncomfortable talking at first, but eventually she told me something that changed everything. She said that about a month before Dad died, he'd been very agitated about some papers Diana wanted him to sign. "Your father, he was confused by the medicine sometimes," Carmen told me. "But that day, he was sharp, you know. He kept saying the papers weren't right, that he needed to call you." Diana got very upset with him. Carmen said she'd overheard Diana telling Dad that the papers were just medical forms, nothing important, but Dad kept insisting something was wrong. The last thing he said to me, Carmen whispered, he said, "Carmen, I hope Kevin knows I would never forget him." Diana, she's not telling the truth about something. That's when I knew. Diana hadn't just received an unexpected inheritance. She'd manipulated Dad into signing a new will, possibly when he was medicated and confused. My attorney filed a lawsuit challenging the will on grounds of undue influence and fraud. Diana's response was to hire her husband's law firm to fight me. The legal battle stretched on for 18 months. Diana denied everything, claiming she'd simply been a devoted daughter taking care of our dying father. She painted me as a distant son who'd only shown up at the end, jealous that Dad had appreciated her more. It hurt. Every accusation, every legal filing, every court appearance drove the knife deeper. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my relationship with Dad, my memories of him, and the sister I thought I knew. But my attorney kept digging, and eventually we found something incredible. Dad had indeed had a previous will, and we found it in the most unexpected place. Tom Walsh, my private investigator, had been methodically going through Dad's business records, looking for anything that might indicate his true intentions for the estate. That's when he discovered that Dad had maintained a safe deposit box at a different bank, one that Diana apparently didn't know about. Getting access to that safe deposit box required a court order, which took months to obtain. Diana's lawyers fought it every step of the way, claiming it was a fishing expedition. But when we finally opened that box, we struck gold. Inside was Dad's original will, dated 5 years earlier, which split everything equally between Diana and me. But more importantly, there was a handwritten note, dated just 2 weeks before Dad died. The note was in Dad's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. It said, "If something happens to me, Kevin needs to know that the papers Diana brought me weren't what she said they were." I tried to call him, but she took my phone. I never wanted to change my will. Diana has been lying about everything. The real will is in this box. Kevin and Diana should share everything equally, like I always planned. I hope Kevin can forgive me for not being strong enough to stop her. Reading those words, I broke down crying right there in the bank vault. Dad hadn't betrayed me. He'd tried to protect me, but Diana had manipulated him when he was at his weakest. Armed with this new evidence, my attorney immediately filed for an emergency hearing. This was the smoking gun we needed to prove that the will Diana had submitted was fraudulent. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning in Judge Harrison's courtroom. I'd been to several hearings before, but this one felt different. This was our chance to expose the truth. Diana arrived with her legal team, looking confident. She'd gotten used to winning every motion, every procedural battle. Her lawyers had successfully painted me as a bitter brother grasping for money that wasn't rightfully mine. But today was different. My attorney, Lisa Chen, stood up and addressed the court. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that fundamentally changes this case. We've discovered Mr. Mitchell's original will and a handwritten note that proves the will currently in probate was obtained through fraud and undue influence." Diana's face went pale. Her lawyer immediately objected, claiming the evidence was improperly obtained or somehow fabricated. But Judge Harrison was intrigued. "Let me see this evidence," he said. Lisa handed him the original will and Dad's handwritten note. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read both documents carefully. His expression grew increasingly serious. Finally, Judge Harrison looked up. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, addressing Diana, "can you explain to this court how your father's original will ended up in a safe deposit box that was never disclosed during probate proceedings?" Diana's lawyer whispered something to her, but she looked panicked. "I don't know anything about another safe deposit box, Your Honor." "And can you explain this handwritten note, which appears to be in your father's handwriting, stating that you misrepresented the nature of documents you asked him to sign?" That's when Diana made the biggest mistake of her life. Instead of staying quiet or pleading the Fifth Amendment, she tried to lie her way out. "Your Honor, my father was very sick at the end. He was confused, on pain medication. He didn't know what he was writing. That note, it doesn't mean anything." "Miss Mitchell, are you suggesting your father was not competent when he signed the will that benefits you, but was also not competent when he wrote this note? You can't have it both ways." Diana's lawyer was trying to get her to stop talking, but she kept going. Judge, my father loved me more than Kevin. Everyone knows that. Kevin barely visited. I was the one who took care of everything. Dad wanted me to have the estate because I deserved it. The more she talked, the deeper she dug her hole. With every word, Diana was destroying her own credibility. Furthermore, Judge Harrison said, I am troubled by testimony that you systematically isolated your father from family and friends during his final months. That behavior is consistent with someone attempting to exert undue influence over a vulnerable person. Diana's face was bright red now. Her lawyer was practically begging her to be quiet. But Judge Harrison wasn't done. Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you directly, under oath, did you ever misrepresent the nature of documents you asked your father to sign during his illness? Diana's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She knew she was trapped. If she said yes, she was admitting to fraud. I was just trying to help him with his affairs, she finally stammered. That's not what I asked you, Judge Harrison said firmly. Did you or did you not misrepresent the nature of legal documents to your dying father? The silence stretched on forever. Diana looked at her lawyer, who was staring at the table. She looked at Brandon, who was sitting in the gallery behind her, looking mortified. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I was just trying to make things easier. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair. Ms. Mitchell, what you've just described is elder abuse. You took advantage of your father's illness and confusion to defraud him and your brother. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Furthermore, the judge continued, based on the evidence presented today, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into potential criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. They were tears of panic, of someone who'd finally been caught after years of lies. Judge Harrison turned to me. Mr. Mitchell, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing any further distribution of estate assets. We're going to sort this out properly. Over the following weeks, everything unraveled for Diana. The criminal investigation moved forward. The district attorney was very interested in prosecuting a case involving elder abuse and inheritance fraud, but the civil case resolved much faster. Faced with Dad's original will and his handwritten note, plus the testimony of Carmen the housekeeper and other witnesses who testified about Diana's behavior, Diana's lawyers advised her to settle. In the end, the estate was divided exactly as Dad's original will specified, 50-50 between Diana and me. But Diana also had to pay my legal fees, which were substantial after 2 years of litigation. More importantly to me, Dad's reputation was restored. The court officially recognized that his original will reflected his true intentions, and that Diana had taken advantage of his illness to defraud both him and me. Diana and I haven't spoken since the settlement. She and Brandon moved to another state, probably to escape the scandal. Some family members think I should forgive her, that we should try to rebuild our relationship. But I can't get past what she did. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a simple mistake. Diana systematically manipulated our dying father, isolated him from people who loved him, and lied under oath to steal from me. She would have let me believe that Dad didn't care about me, that he deliberately excluded me from his will. The money was never really the point. What Diana stole from me was my final months with Dad and my peace of mind about his feelings for me. She let me think I was unloved, forgotten, when the truth was that Dad had tried to protect me with his dying breath. Sometimes people ask me if I regret fighting the will, if I think it was worth tearing our family apart. But here's the thing. Diana tore our family apart the moment she decided to betray Dad's trust and mine. I just made sure the truth came to light. Dad's handwritten note sits framed on my desk now. When I read it, I'm reminded that even when someone you love is manipulating the situation, even when you're at your most vulnerable, the truth has a way of surviving. Sometimes it takes time, sometimes it takes fighting for it, but the truth endures. Diana thought she was clever enough to get away with the perfect crime. She almost did. If Dad hadn't had the foresight to hide that original will and write that note, she might have succeeded. But in the end, love won over greed. Dad's love for me, his desire to be fair, his determination to leave the truth somewhere I could find it. That love was stronger than Diana's lies. I still miss my sister sometimes, the sister I thought I knew before all this happened. But I've learned that grief is complicated. You can mourn someone who's still alive, Someone who chose to become a stranger through their own actions. Dad's estate allowed me to pay off my house, set up college funds for my kids, and even start a small scholarship in Dad's name at the local community college. Every time I write a check for that scholarship, I think about how proud Dad would be that his money is helping kids get an education. That's his real legacy. Not the legal battle, not the courtroom drama, but the good his hard work continues to do in the world. Diana tried to steal that from both of us, but in the end, Dad's generosity lives on exactly as he intended. Justice isn't always swift, and it's rarely perfect. But sometimes, when you have the courage to fight for the truth, when you refuse to let lies stand unchallenged, sometimes justice prevails, and sometimes that's enough.